Good morning, brethren. As you might well be aware, um, many of us are aware by now that because of this coronavirus, for the public safety and protection, sanctions were put in place, and we are not above the law. So, as a church body, we have to abide by these regulations. No more than 20 persons, and we were told that from the head trickling down, that we were told not to open our doors this morning. We can understand for public safety and protection. However, we have to create some contingency measures so that we can still worship, we can still share, we can still sharpen each other in the Lord. So we are using what the Lord has given us, that is technology. I am not so versed with it, but trust me, I am going to try. So we will be having, for as long as this continues, we don't know for how long, we will be having our online Sunday school, not in church. So I welcome you all who have tuned in, who are enjoying this medium. We would like to welcome you wholeheartedly as we try our best to do the best we can with what we have. Now, for March 22, we continue the unit theme, the prophecies of Daniel. And we know that this is a prophecy about the four empires. We had introduced it before we left the last Sunday school. So I know you have read ahead. Our unit theme today is the prophecies of Daniel, central truth. Christ's everlasting kingdom will triumph over all. Our focus, acknowledge God's sovereignty over times and nations, and rejoice in the promise of Christ's coming kingdom. Isn't it a fitting focus, considering all that is happening around us? When this was written, I doubt if they had any idea that it would be so timely. The context is traditionally thought to have been written during the Babylonian captivity, 606 to 530 BC. Our golden text this morning, there was given him the dominion and glory and a kingdom, and all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. And our study outline is taken this morning from Daniel 7, and our first section is Vision of the Four Beasts. That's verses 1 to 8. Then we have the second section, which is the vision interpreted, Daniel 7, verses 15 to 28. And our final section, God's kingdom triumphs over all. And that's Daniel 7, verses 9 to 14. So the verses are not chronological this morning. We take it as it comes. Yes, some people try to live in the past. Adjusting to change is difficult for them, and they long for days gone by. That is nothing new. I think people, especially my age, we do that a lot. We have a tendency to reminisce and look back. It's not always a bad thing, because as someone rightly said, to have a knowledge of your past is important, so you know how to proceed with your future. But here is when something is wrong. When we dwell on the past, when we can't get past the past in order to function properly in the present or to position ourselves for the future, that is when it becomes a problem. When we have an obsession to live in the past. God has done much for us. However, it is one thing to remember and honor the past, but it's quite another thing to live in it. The apostle advises us not to dwell in the past, that we are to put the past behind us and to press forward for the goal that is in front of us. Sometimes we are so busy dissecting the past that we don't have time to really focus on the present and remember now that it is the present that is going to shape the future. So Paul correctly says that we are to put the past behind us. Put the past behind us and let us strive, let us press forward for the things that are ahead. Other people have an unhealthy obsession with the future. Their interest in the Bible is limited to the study of the last days, and they have little concern for discipleship and faithful living. Certainly we should be noticing the signs of the times and be eagerly awaiting the return of Jesus. However, Jesus emphasized that we must work until he comes. We can't be so caught up in the future that nothing else really matters. We don't place any emphasis on anything else. We are so tied up and caught up in knowing when the end will come and to watch out for these signs and what are the signs and how soon, how far away, where are we in connection to the times, where are we in prophecy. Some people are so caught up in all of this watching for end time prophecies and seeing where we are in relation to where those prophecies are, that we forget that Jesus himself gave us a commission and that he said that we should work until he comes. Now Daniel understood both the heritage of his past and God's plan for the future in light of these two perspectives. You have two different ends of the pendulum, which are quite opposites. He walked with God in the midst of severe opposition. At the end of Daniel 5, we learned that Babylon was conquered by Darius the Mede. We did that in the last Sunday school, who subsequently appointed 120 administrators and 3 governors to direct the affairs of Babylon. And that's in chapter 6, verse 12. Yes, verse 12. Daniel was one of these 3 governors that were appointed to govern the affairs of Babylon. The 120 administrators and the 2 other governors soon became jealous of Daniel's outstanding performance. And aren't we familiar with that? As children of God, when God grants us divine favor, when he places a hand on our lives and blesses us, the enemy takes notice. And the enemy is usually jealous or threatened by God's blessings upon our lives and God's divine favor working through us. And they would always like to put a stop to it. They examined his life, that is the other 120 administrators. They examined his life in great detail, but were unable to find any fault with him. Wow, that's amazing. Can we say that? Can we truly say that? If someone was to examine our lives, someone who is jealous of how God's divine favor is really shining in our lives and want to set a trap for us, if they examine our lives very carefully, what will they find? Will we be as spotless as Daniel? Will we be as faultless as this man of God? However, they didn't find any fault with him. Therefore, they devised a plan to entrap Daniel in regard to his religion. Playing on the pride of King Darius, they convinced him to issue a decree that forbade anyone to pray to any god other than Darius, King Darius. No, pride can get us in quite a fix. And pride can get us in some real mess that we didn't even foresee. I know that when I read the scriptures and I read the Sunday school commentary, I recognized that Darius loved Daniel. He trusted Daniel. Daniel was one of his favorite people. And if he knew what the real reason was behind their petition, I am dead sure that he would never have agreed to any such thing. But imagine, it's interesting. These administrators knew 2 things. One for Daniel, one for King Darius. They knew that if they were going to catch Daniel at all, it had to be something to do with his faithfulness concerning his religion. And they also knew, King Darius, that if they were to use him to entrap Daniel, they would have to use his pride. They knew about this boastful pride, this haughty spirit, this false pride. So they knew exactly where to touch, which button to touch with each. Daniel, however, continued to pray as usual, calling on the Lord of Israel 3 times per day, every day. So therefore he was arrested, condemned to death, and thrown into a den of hungry lions. The Lord came to his rescue and sent an angel to shut the lion's mouth. The king, realizing that Daniel was a good man who had been entrapped unjustly, was happy to see him saved. Those who had plotted against Daniel were now thrown into the same den of lions, and they were devoured immediately. This week's study of Daniel 7 will open up new insights about the future. These insights will enable us to follow Daniel's example of walking by faith in this present world. Sometimes we might look at it and say, that was then, this is now. Daniel's situation will never be ours. Daniel's situation was an isolated one, and one some people believe that happened in order for the scriptures to reveal God as the divine Savior, the divine rescuer, the divine deliverer. But may I tell you that anything that was then, you can find it now. It might be in different shape and size and form. It might be different systems, but we do suffer persecution. And the same enemy that existed then, that causes these kind of situations, he exists now. And the same reason back then is the same reason now. The devil doesn't want God to be glorified. He doesn't want people to trust in him and glorify him as the one and only sovereign God. The enemy doesn't want God to be seen as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He wants to take part in that glory. He wants to be seen as the king and authority of mankind and of the earth. But God, in the same way that he had plans, God doesn't have contingency plans, you know. God does not have contingency plans because plan A never fails. When God has a divine plan, that will come to pass. His word will not come back to him void. It will accomplish what it will. And we have seen it in this story of Daniel, that the Lord has divine purpose and divine plans that will never fail. His word shall certainly come to pass. Vision of the 4 beasts, Daniel chapter 7, 1 to 8. And this is an introduction to the visions of Daniel. I read verse 1. It says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters." Now, the first six chapters of the book of Daniel are arranged in chronological order. And the story of Daniel and the lions then concludes the first half of the book. By the time we reach chapter 6, Daniel is an elderly statesman over the age of 80. So it went from Daniel as a young man, and it spans 6 chapters. By the end of that, Daniel is an old man, senior citizen. The second part of the book of Daniel, and that's from chapters 7 to 12, is different from the first part in three ways. First, the visions in chapters 7 to 12 are in topical order, not chronological. Chapter 7 places emphasis during the first year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king who dies at the end of chapter 5. The historical order of the chapters would be chapters 7, 8, then it goes back to chapter 5, then chapter 6, then it jumps to chapter 9, and then it skips to chapter 12. Places between 9 and 12. Second, the stories in chapters 1 to 6 are told about Daniel, but Daniel is not the speaker. In chapters 7 to 12, Daniel is the speaker, and he is telling his own experiences. Third, chapters 1 to 6 are composed of stories. By chapters 7 to 12 would be called apocalyptic literature, like the book of Revelation. Through the extensive use of symbolism, visions, and angelic direction, this literature reveals God's judgment on present world powers and the certainty of God's eternal kingdom at the end of this age. Going back in the time, in the first year of Belshazzar, we're skipping back to the first year, in the year of Belshazzar's the first year of Belshazzar's reign, yes. We're going to skip right back to that. Daniel recounts his experience of divine revelation. By using the word dream and by stating that it was upon his bed, Daniel is indicating that he was asleep when the visions came to him. Daniel is indicating that this was something that happened, that he saw in his dreams. These were revelations in his mind. They came to him in dreams. Therefore, Daniel was given revelations of the future in the context of a dream. As soon as Daniel awoke, he wrote the dream. As an educated man, he would have been writing materials. He would have writing materials available. In the original language, the word "sum" means beginning. That means Daniel would have written this thing from the beginning. So he started from the beginning and recorded the entire dream. It was important that he wrote the dream immediately because it faded from his memory if time goes on. It is also significant that he was concerned to record the dream for the benefit of future generations. How would you and I would be taking part in this discussion? Would be reading about this, what Daniel dreamt, if he had not written it down. Other prophets also wrote down their revelations, which Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk. Writing the prophecy made it more definite and its details more accurate. Also, by having the prophecy in writing, the prophet could be verified and vindicated when the predictions came to pass. I have an experience similar. Not prophecies, not any prophecies revealed to me by God. But I remember some years ago I went to women's ministry, and Sister Robinson was the one. We had top group the first morning, and some things were spoken into my life. The other morning, we had this lady from Westmoreland, tall, powerful. I don't remember her name right now. Sister Davis probably would remember her. And she prophesied some things into my life again. And when I went back to my room, I tried to remember everything that Sister Robinson told me the day before, and I couldn't. And I said, you know what is good? Let me write down these things that were fresh in Sister Lola. That Sister Lola said the morning. And I wrote them down as far as I could remember. I forgot some already by the time I went to my room. But I wrote down all of them that I could remember. And funny enough, from time to time, years have passed. And from time to time, I will go back to those prophecies. And I worship God. because I saw wherein God had fulfilled his word in my life for the most part. There is about one or two things, one thing actually, that is still work in progress. But all the other things had come to pass that she had prophesied in my life. But I cannot recall what Sister Robinson said because I didn't write it down. But the things that Sister Lola prophesied in my life, I remembered vividly because I could go back and read it and match it up to what was happening in my life. So for that, we give Daniel thanks and we give God thanks, because today we are looking at those dreams, those visions that Daniel had, and we can line it up with other revelations, and we can also line it up with happenings that have already happened to see whether or not these prophecies were fulfilled. Now we continue in the second portion, Daniel's vision of 4 beasts. I read in your hearing. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and exceedingly strong. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. No, it continuously tells us that this beast was diverse, meaning it's different from all the other beasts that Daniel saw. In his vision, Daniel is by the sea, and the wind is blowing from every direction. This great sea was the Mediterranean Sea. And back in those days, the Mediterranean Sea had a lot of stigma attached to it. It was considered to be waters of trouble and waters of demons and terror. Lots of demonic activities went on over those waters back then. The Mediterranean Sea, in ancient times, the sea was a symbol of chaos and destructive evil. In the Old Testament, God blasts the sea with his rebuke. And we have other scriptures that says he sets a guard over the sea, that's found in Job. He causes the sea to dry up, that's in Nahum. He treads on the sea, Habakkuk. He fights the sea monsters in Isaiah. The bottom line is that the description of the sea at the beginning of Daniel's vision evokes horror and an anticipation of evil. The 4 winds of heaven often represent creative power. The 4 wind is, I don't know if I pronounce it right, Ruach. And it can also be translated as spirit. It is the spirit, the Ruach of God, that blows over the waters of the original creation. It is the east wind, which is the Ruach, that divides the Red Sea so Israel can cross on dry ground. And in Exodus, the prophet Ezekiel calls upon the 4 winds, which is the same Ruach, to breathe life into the dry bones of Israel. And in Ezekiel as well, the striving of the 4 winds means God is at work, and his power lies behind the following activities. 4 beasts emerge from the sea, corresponding to the 4 winds of heaven. That's in Daniel 7 verse 3. The 4 beasts are different from each other, but they are all beasts. The first beast is like a lion, but it had eagle's wings. Its wings are plucked off. This I found interesting. It is made to stand upright like a man, and a man's heart is placed in it. The lion is a dangerous animal known for its ferocity, and the eagle's wings might represent the ability to soar through the sky and oversee a large territory. The lion is transformed, however, by first having its wings removed and then by taking the form of a human being. Finally, it is given a man's heart, which suggests it becomes less evil, less dangerous, and more humane in its attitude. The second beast is like a bear. It raises itself up on one side, meaning it has lifted its paws and ready to strike. It has 3 ribs in its mouth, oh Lord, which signifies it is devouring its enemies. The bear is encouraged to rise up and devour much flesh. Therefore, it is very powerful and prepared to expand its conquest. The third beast is like a leopard, that's in verse 6, a wild animal that is fast and deadly. The leopard has 4 wings and 4 heads. The wings suggest it goes far and wide, defeating its enemies quickly. The 4 heads may, however, often represent completeness and universality, as is the 4 wings, that is in verse 2, or the 4 points of a compass. The 4 points of a compass would encompass everything: the north, the south, the east, the west. Anywhere on this earth, you have those 4 points can be used, whether it is in north, east, northwest, southeast, southwest, north, east, south, or west, or north, the intermediate points. The fourth beast is the center of attention, and it receives a more lengthy description. The beast is not likened to any known animal, which suggests its unique qualities, where the last animal is not named. This beast is described as dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. It evokes fear and terror in those who see it. This beast has big iron teeth with which it can crush all opposition. Iron was the hardest material known to the ancient world. The fourth beast utterly destroys everything and everyone standing in its way. It devours, and when it does, and what it does not eat, example, the bones, it's broken into pieces. Then those pieces are trampled underfoot and crushed to powder. This beast has 10 horns, which represents strength, power, and kingly authority. The number of horns correspond to the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's vision and may signify 10 leaders, but 10 is also the number of fullness. We're heading on to section 3c, wherein it speaks of Daniel's vision of the little horn. It says here in verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of man, and the mouth speaketh great things. Although the number 10 might not be literal, it seems likely the 3 plucked up horns might refer to 3 specific leaders who are replaced by 3 of the 10 that has eyes like the eyes of man, which makes it more a normal animal. God gave Adam and Eve and all of humanity the authority to exercise dominion over the earth. Therefore, rulership is the right of humans. Thus, the human eyes give the little horn the right and responsibility to rule. Eyes also represent human desire and awareness, and they reveal the true nature of the inner person. Haughty eyes indicate pride of heart. Therefore, it is not surprising that the little horn has a mouth that spoke boastfully. First, we practice sin, then defend it, then boast of it. And this is from Thomas Manton. Interesting. The vision interpreted, we continue in the second section. In section 2, we move to verses 15 to 28 to explore the meaning of the 4 beasts. We will go back to the vision in the final section of the lesson. The first 3 beasts, 15 to 22. These scenes of terrible beasts disturbed Daniel and grieved him in his spirit. The beasts were frightful, and Daniel was anxious to know what the dream meant. Confused and dazed, Daniel looked around and saw heavenly messengers standing nearby. So he asked one of them to reveal the meaning of the dream. The messenger willingly explained the interpretation for Daniel. The four beasts are four kings, he said, and they correspond to the four parts of the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's earlier dream. Remember that statue last week? It wasn't last week, it was a week before last, where he said he had the head of gold and the breast and hands that were silver. His loins and thighs were bronze. His legs were iron and his feet of clay. But we're not talking about the clay today. The four metals, that is what they were talking about here. The individual kings represent the entire kingdoms over which they rule. Babylon, for example, had 5 kings who came after Nebuchadnezzar. But the dreams of both Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel conceive a Babylon as only one kingdom. Bible scholars offer 2 different interpretations of the 4 beasts. The first view is that the beasts represent the 4 kingdoms of Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece. The second view is that the 4 kingdoms are Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, making Media and Persia one kingdom. However, the messenger does not speak specific details regarding the identity of each beast. The most important thing is the interpretation, is that the saints, the people of God, will take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever. Daniel is not quite satisfied with this brief interpretation. Therefore, he requests more information regarding the 4 beasts. He then sees them until the war is interrupted by the coming of the Ancient of Days. And the expression the Ancient of Days is referring to God here. In the olden days, back then, God was referred to as the Ancient of Days, indicating that he has no beginning, he has no end. He was there before time began, and he will be there after time has ended. So he was called the Ancient of Days. This person is God himself, who is called the Most High. The Ancient of Days has the power and authority to exercise judgment and to give the kingdom to the saints. When verse 22 says judgment was given to the saints, it means judgment was rendered in favor of the saints and against the little horn. The 4th beast and the little horn, and I'm going to read from verse 23 to verse 27. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth.